The night had grown quiet in Laura's home, the kind of stillness that only came when the world outside was resting. The clock ticked softly on her bedside table, and the glow of the lamp painted warm shadows against the pale walls of her bedroom. She had spent the evening finishing a novel, the kind that left her thinking long after she closed the final page. With a sigh of contentment, she set the book aside, turned off the lamp, and nestled beneath her blanket. At last, she thought she could sleep. But just as her eyes closed, a sound broke the silence. A knock, gentle, hesitant, but enough to startle her awake. Laura's heart skipped. It wasn't often that someone came to her door at this hour. She sat up quickly, listening closely to make sure she hadn't imagined it. A second knock came, soft yet insistent, and this time there was no mistaking it. Her pulse quickened. "Who is it?" she called, her voice calm but carrying the hint of worry. There was a pause, then a familiar voice answered, low and uneasy. "Mom, it's me. Can I come in?" Laura frowned slightly. It was Daniel, her only son, and the weight in his tone instantly unsettled her. He wasn't the kind to disturb her late at night. Something about the way he spoke told her this wasn't a casual visit. It was serious. She reached over to switch the lamp back on, bathing the room in a golden glow once more. "Of course," she said softly. "Come in, Daniel." The door creaked open slowly, and her son stepped inside. At 21, Daniel was no longer a boy. Yet in this moment he looked vulnerable, his shoulders slumped, his hands shoved into the pockets of his hoodie, his expression clouded with thought. He closed the door behind him with unusual care, as if even that simple act weighed heavily on him. Laura's eyes softened, though her heart tightened with unease. "What's the matter?" she asked gently. Daniel hesitated, then took a few slow steps toward the bed before stopping at the edge. He didn't sit down right away, just stood there, shifting from one foot to the other. Laura noticed how restless he seemed, how tightly he pressed his lips together. She had seen that look before, the look of someone fighting with their own words. "Mom," he finally said, his voice shaky, "I need to talk to you. About something important. Something I've been keeping to myself for a long time." Laura straightened, pushing aside the blanket so she could give him her full attention. Her chest felt heavy, but she didn't let it show. She offered a small nod instead, signaling her openness. "Go on, sweetheart. Whatever it is, you can tell me." Daniel still didn't sit. His fingers fidgeted nervously, pulling at the strings of his hoodie. His breathing was uneven, as though he were preparing for a confession that had lived in his heart for years. Laura recognized the tension in him. She had seen it in others before. It was the tension of someone carrying a truth that had grown too heavy to keep alone. After a long pause, he finally lowered himself onto the edge of the bed. His eyes remained fixed on the floor, avoiding her gaze. "I don't know how to start," he whispered. Laura reached over, placing her hand on his. "Start anywhere. I'm here." The warmth of her touch seemed to give him a little strength, but not enough to steady his voice. "I've been hiding something from you. From everyone. And I can't keep it in anymore. I don't want to live like that." Laura felt her heart thud harder. Fear and tenderness collided inside her. She wanted to pull him close, to take away whatever weight he carried, but she stayed calm, giving him the space he needed to continue. "Daniel," she said softly, "whatever this is, it doesn't change how much I love you. Nothing ever could." At her words, he finally lifted his eyes to hers. They were glassy with unshed tears, and she could see both fear and hope battling within him. "Promise?" he asked, his voice almost childlike in its vulnerability. "I promise," she said without hesitation. That small exchange seemed to break something open in him. He let out a long, shaky breath, his shoulders sagging as though a weight had slipped slightly off. Yet still, the words didn't come easily. He looked at her, then looked away, his jaw tightening. Laura studied him in silence, resisting the urge to fill the air with her own words. She had learned long ago that sometimes silence was the greatest gift, that it gave people the courage to fill it with truth. Minutes passed, though they felt longer. Finally, Daniel spoke again. "You've always believed in me, Mom, You've always thought I was strong, like Dad. But the truth is, I'm not the person you think I am. I've been pretending." Laura's chest ached at the rawness in his voice. She wanted to reassure him, but she knew this wasn't the moment for her words. It was his turn. She squeezed his hand gently, urging him to go on. Daniel's voice broke as he continued. "I've been so afraid to tell you. Afraid you'd look at me differently. Afraid I'd lose you if I said it out loud." At that, Laura couldn't hold back her emotion. "Daniel," she whispered, "you could never lose me. You're my son. Whatever you're carrying, we'll face it together." Her certainty seemed to steady him just a little. His eyes filled with tears, but his shoulders straightened. He wiped at his face, embarrassed by his own emotion. But Laura only saw strength in it. For a moment, he tried to speak, but no words came. Then he finally whispered, "I don't want to live with this secret anymore. I don't want to keep pretending. I need you to know who I really am." The room grew so quiet that Laura could hear the clock ticking on her nightstand. Her heart pounded in her chest, but her face remained calm, full of love. She didn't press him. She didn't demand the truth in one breath. She only leaned closer, her eyes never leaving his. "Then tell me," she said gently. "Tell me what you've been carrying. I'm ready to listen." Daniel inhaled deeply, holding her gaze. His lips parted, trembling slightly as though the words themselves carried fire. But just as he began to speak, his voice faltered again. He clenched his fists, battling his own fear. Laura's chest tightened. She could sense that whatever he was about to share would change everything, not their love. Not their bond, but the way she understood her son. This was a moment that would draw a line in their lives before the truth and after it. And as she waited, her hand still resting warmly over his, Laura knew with certainty that neither of them would sleep that night. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, his body tense, his words caught in his throat. Laura could feel the storm within him, the heavy truth pressing against the walls of his chest, waiting to escape. The silence between them grew thick, yet she didn't rush him. She only gave him her steady gaze, her hand a gentle anchor on his trembling one. Finally, Daniel exhaled. "Mom," he said, his voice unsteady, "I've been living with something I didn't know how to share. I thought if I hid it, maybe it would go away. But it hasn't. And now, I can't carry it alone anymore." Laura's heart pounded, but she nodded slowly, her calm presence urging him forward. "You're safe here. Whatever you say, it stays between us. You don't have to hide from me." Daniel swallowed hard, his throat dry. His eyes flickered to hers and then back down to the floor. "I've always wanted to make you and Dad proud. I've tried to be everything you expected. Strong, responsible, normal. But the truth is, I'm not who you think I am." The words trembled in the air, and Laura felt her breath hitch. She reached for his hand again, squeezing it firmly. "Daniel, nothing you tell me will make me love you less. That's the one thing you can never change." Tears welled in his eyes, his lips quivering as if the weight of years of silence pressed against them. Finally, he let out a shaky laugh, bitter at first. "It's crazy. I've practiced this moment so many times in my head. But now that I'm here, I don't even know how to say it." Laura gave a faint smile, though her eyes glistened. "Then don't practice. Just be real. Say it however it comes out." Her words seemed to unlock something in him. Daniel drew in a deep breath, and his chest rose and fell heavily. "I'm scared," he admitted quietly. "Scared that when I tell you, everything will change. That you won't see me the same way again." Laura leaned closer, her voice steady and filled with warmth. "Daniel, look at me." He lifted his eyes reluctantly, and she held his gaze with unwavering love. "You are my son. Nothing in this world could ever erase that bond. Tell me what's in your heart. I can handle it." Daniel's defenses finally broke. His voice cracked as he whispered, "I've been hiding who I am, Mom. I'm not the person everyone thinks I am. I'm different, and I can't keep pretending anymore." Laura's chest tightened. His words carried layers she didn't yet understand, but she could feel the raw pain behind them. She brushed her thumb over his hand, silent encouragement for him to go on. He took another breath, his whole body trembling as he forced the words out. I've been hiding my real self because I didn't think anyone would accept me, especially Dad. But I can't live a lie. I need you to know me the real me. Laura's eyes softened with tears. She didn't know yet what truth he carried, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Her son was in pain, and that was all that mattered in this moment. You've been carrying this alone for too long, she said gently. But you don't have to anymore. You're home. You're safe with me. Tell me what you've been holding inside. Daniel's lips pressed together, his jaw tightening as though the truth itself resisted leaving. But then, slowly, the words slipped out. Mom, I don't fit into the box everyone put me in. I'm not like the person you've always thought I was. I've tried to play that role, but it's not me. Laura felt her breath catch again, but she didn't interrupt. She let the silence stretch, allowing him to continue in his own rhythm. His voice was barely above a whisper when he added, I'm tired of pretending. I want to live as myself. I don't know what the future will look like, and I'm scared. But I had to tell you tonight. I couldn't sleep until I did. A wave of emotion swept through Laura. Relief that he had finally spoken. Sadness that he had carried this burden alone. And above all, fierce love that rose stronger than ever. She reached out, pulling him into her arms before he could second-guess himself. Daniel stiffened at first. But then he melted into her embrace. His shoulders shook as he let out the tears he had been holding back for years. I was so scared you'd hate me, he whispered into her shoulder. Hate you. Laura's voice broke. She held him tighter, her tears falling freely now. Daniel, you are my son. You're my heart. Nothing you say could ever take that away. I don't care what anyone else thinks, you are enough, just as you are. For a long time, they stayed that way, mother and son wrapped in the safety of each other's arms. The weight that had once hung over Daniel's heart began to lift, replaced by the warmth of acceptance he had longed for. When they finally pulled back, his eyes were red, his cheeks wet with tears. But there was something new in his expression, relief. The secret was out, and he was still loved. Thank you, Mom, he said softly. I don't know what's going to happen now, but I feel lighter, like I can finally breathe. Laura brushed a strand of hair from his forehead, smiling through her tears. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. You don't have to go through it alone anymore. Daniel gave a small nod, his lips curving into the faintest smile. For the first time in years, he felt safe in his truth. But deep down, both of them knew this was just the beginning. As the night stretched on, Laura leaned back against the pillows, still holding his hand. You don't have to say more tonight if you're not ready, she said softly. But whenever you are, I'll be here. Daniel squeezed her hand in return, gratitude shining in his tired eyes. I'm ready to share everything. But not tonight. Tonight, I just wanted you to know. Laura smiled, her heart aching with love and pride. She turned off the lamp, leaving only the moonlight spilling across the room. Daniel stayed by her side a while longer, silent but comforted. And as she listened to the steady rhythm of his breathing, Laura knew that this night, the night of his confession, would be a turning point in both their lives. The next morning came quietly, though the weight of the night before lingered in Laura's chest. She moved around the kitchen, setting out coffee mugs and slicing fruit, her mind replaying Daniel's trembling voice and the words he had finally managed to speak. He had trusted her with a truth he had hidden for so long. And now everything felt different, fragile, yet stronger than ever. Daniel walked in, his eyes heavy from a night of little sleep, but his shoulders seemed lighter. He gave her a tentative smile, and she returned it warmly. Neither of them mentioned the conversation immediately, but the silence between them no longer felt cold. It felt alive with unspoken understanding. Hungry? Laura asked softly, placing a plate of toast on the table. Yeah. Thanks, he replied, sitting down. His voice was quiet, but steadier than the night before. As they ate, Daniel finally broke the silence. I don't know what happens now, Mom, I feel like I've been standing on one side of a wall and I just climbed over it. But I don't know what's waiting for me on this side." Laura set her mug down, her gaze gentle. "What's waiting for you is freedom, Daniel. And me. Always me." His eyes softened, but a flicker of worry crossed his face. "And Dad?" The question hung in the air, sharp and heavy. Laura's heart tightened. She knew her husband Mark loved their son fiercely. But she also knew he was stubborn, set in his ways, and not always quick to accept things he didn't understand. "We'll take it one step at a time," she said carefully. "He loves you, Daniel. I believe he'll come around. But we'll make sure you're ready before you talk to him. You don't have to face that alone." Daniel nodded slowly, but Laura could see the doubt in his eyes. She reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. "You're braver than you think. Last night proved that. Whatever happens next, we'll handle it together." That afternoon, Laura found herself alone in the garden, pulling weeds while her mind churned. The sun was warm, but her thoughts were heavy. Should she tell Mark first? Should she wait for Daniel to find his own moment? She knew rushing it could cause damage, but she also knew hiding it too long would only make things worse. Later that evening, Mark came home from work, his usual cheer filling the house. He kissed Laura on the cheek, greeted Daniel warmly, and settled into his chair. Completely unaware of the storm swirling just beneath the surface, Laura watched her son from across the room. He laughed when his father made a joke, but the laughter didn't reach his eyes. She could see the strain, the effort to pretend everything was normal. It broke her heart. That night, after Mark had gone to bed, Daniel sat with Laura in the living room. His face was pale, his hands restless. "I don't know how to tell him," he confessed. "What if he doesn't accept me? What if I lose him?" Laura leaned closer, her eyes glistening. "You won't lose him. It might be hard at first, but he's your father. He'll need time to understand, but love doesn't disappear overnight. And if he struggles, we'll help him, together." Daniel stared at the floor, silent. Then, with a trembling voice, he said, "Can you be there when I tell him?" "Of course," she answered instantly, pulling him into a side hug. "You'll never face this alone." The following day, Laura decided to speak to Mark privately to prepare his heart before Daniel shared his truth. She found him in the garage fixing an old lamp, his hands busy but his mind calm. She hesitated, her chest tight, before saying, "Mark, there's something important Daniel wants to tell you. Something he's been carrying for a long time." Mark looked up, frowning. "Is he in trouble?" "No," Laura said quickly. "Nothing like that. But it's personal. He's been scared to share it because he doesn't want to disappoint you." Mark's brows furrowed, confusion etched on his face. "Disappoint me?" He could never. He stopped, reading the concern in her eyes. "Laura, what's going on?" She took a steadying breath. "It's not my story to tell. It's his. But I need you to promise me you'll listen with love when he does. He needs to know his father will stand by him." Mark looked unsettled, his wrench slipping from his hand. "You're scaring me." Laura stepped closer, touching his arm gently. "Don't be scared. Just be open. That's all I ask." That night, when the dishes were done and the house grew quiet, Laura gathered her courage. She looked at Daniel, gave him a small nod, and he understood. It was time. They sat together in the living room, the lamp casting a soft glow across the walls. Mark looked between them, sensing the tension. "All right," he said slowly. "Someone tell me what's going on." Daniel's breath caught in his throat, but Laura squeezed his hand firmly. He looked at his father, his voice trembling but determined. "Dad, there's something I need to tell you about myself. Something I've hidden because I was afraid of how you'd react." Mark's expression shifted to concern, his eyes narrowing slightly, but he didn't speak. Daniel swallowed hard. His hand shook as he tried to steady his voice. "I've been pretending to be someone I'm not. I thought if I kept it hidden, maybe it would go away. But it hasn't. And I can't keep living a lie. This is who I am." The room fell silent. Mark's face went still, his eyes searching his son's, trying to process the words. Laura's heart pounded. every second stretching painfully. She kept her gaze fixed on her husband, silently pleading with him to see the courage in Daniel's eyes, not just the fear. Finally, Mark leaned back in his chair, his jaw tight. He didn't say a word. Daniel's face crumpled, his body tensing as if bracing for rejection. Laura quickly reached out, her hand covering Daniel's. "You did it," she whispered. "You were brave. That's all that matters." But in her heart, she knew this moment was far from over. Mark's silence was an answer in itself, an answer that could either break them apart or, in time, draw them closer than ever before. The silence in the living room stretched on, pressing against the walls like a heavy weight. Daniel sat frozen, his hands clenched tightly in his lap, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Laura's heart ached as she watched her son's eyes flicker with fear, waiting for a response that refused to come. Mark leaned back in his chair, staring at the floor, his thoughts hidden behind an unreadable expression. Finally, Mark let out a long, shaky sigh. His voice was low, almost uncertain. "Daniel, I didn't see this coming." Daniel swallowed hard, his voice breaking. "I know. I didn't want to shock you. I couldn't keep pretending anymore." His words trembled. But there was strength in them, Tuan, echo of the courage that had brought him to this moment. Laura squeezed his hand tighter. "He needed to tell the truth, Mark. He's been carrying this for so long." Mark rubbed his forehead, his other hand gripping the arm of his chair. He looked torn, struggling to find his footing between love and confusion. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. "It's not what I pictured for you. It's different from what I imagined when I thought about your future." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. He blinked them back quickly, his voice rough. "I was afraid of that. Afraid that I'd never be enough if I didn't fit the picture you wanted." The words cut deep. Mark's eyes lifted, pained, as he saw the raw emotion in his son's face. He shifted uncomfortably, his voice softening. "Don't ever think you're not enough. You're my son. That's never going to change." But the hesitation in his tone lingered, and Daniel felt it. He stood suddenly, pacing the room, his voice spilling out faster, sharper. "You say that, but do you mean it? Will you still look at me the same way tomorrow? Next week? When I start living honestly instead of hiding?" Laura rose and placed a calming hand on his arm. "Daniel, breathe. This isn't about doubting his love, it's about giving him time to understand. Remember what we talked about?" Daniel looked at her, his eyes shining with frustration and pain. "Time feels like a cage when you've already spent years hiding." Mark's chest tightened at those words. He had always seen his son as strong, capable, full of potential. But now he realized that behind all of it, Daniel had been fighting a silent battle he never even noticed. He felt guilt wash over him, heavy and sharp. "Sit down," Mark said quietly. His tone carried a weight that made Daniel pause. Reluctantly, he sat, though his body remained tense. Mark leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his voice steadier now. "I don't have all the answers tonight. I won't pretend I do. But I need you to hear this clearly. I love you. That will not change. You are my son, and nothing you could ever say would take that away. If I seem shocked, it's only because I wasn't ready. Not because I don't love you." Daniel's breath caught, tears slipping down his cheeks. "You mean that?" Mark nodded firmly. "I mean it. I need time to understand everything, but I'm not walking away. I'm here." Laura's shoulders sagged with relief, her own eyes wet. She reached for Mark's hand, grateful for the bridge he was building. Even if shaky, the room grew quiet again, but this time the silence was softer, less suffocating. Daniel wiped his face, a small flicker of hope lighting his expression. "I can live with that," he whispered. "As long as I know you're still with me." "Ah." Mark gave a faint smile. "Always." Over the next days, the air in the house shifted. There were awkward pauses and uncertain glances. But beneath it all was the unbreakable bond of family slowly finding its way forward. Mark asked questions, sometimes clumsily, sometimes with genuine curiosity. Daniel answered honestly, though at times his voice shook. And Laura, ever the quiet anchor, guided their conversations, softening sharp edges and reminding both of them what truly mattered. One evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sun dip low, Mark finally spoke what had been weighing on him. "Daniel, I'm sorry if I ever made you feel like you couldn't be yourself around me. I thought I was being a good father, but maybe I wasn't paying attention to what you needed most." Daniel looked at him, his throat tight. "You were a good father. You still are. But I didn't give you a chance to know the real me. I was too scared." Mark shook his head gently. "No, I should have seen you were carrying something. I should have asked more, listened more. But I promise you this I'll do better now." Laura smiled through tears, her hand resting on both of theirs. This is what matters. Not perfection, not having all the answers, just love, and the willingness to walk through the hard parts together. For the first time in what felt like years, Daniel felt a deep sense of peace. The fear hadn't vanished entirely, but it no longer owned him. He had spoken his truth, and though the road ahead would be uneven, he knew he wasn't walking it alone. Later that night, as Laura prepared for bed, she caught Daniel standing by her door. He looked calmer, his posture relaxed, his eyes brighter. "Thank you," he said softly. She tilted her head. "For what?" "For not letting me face this alone. For believing in me even when I didn't believe in myself." Her heart swelled, and she pulled him into a gentle embrace. That's what mothers are for. But more than that, it's what family is for. You'll never have to fight alone again. When he finally left her room, Laura lay down and stared at the ceiling, her heart both heavy and full. Life would never return to the way it had been, but maybe that was a blessing. Change had come, uninvited but necessary, carving cracks in their old world so something stronger could grow in its place. And as she closed her eyes, she whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude that her son had trusted her, that her husband was learning, and that their family, though shaken, was still whole.